Now, NATO is preparing to take full command from the US in the operation to enforce a no-fly zone over Libya. The bombing campaign has helped the rebels in their advance towards the capital, Tripoli. In the last few days, they've managed to recapture some key oil towns in the east. Let's cross live now to Tripoli for the latest with RT's Paula Slier, who is standing by for us right now. Paula, we are hearing reports at this very moment of 9 powerful explosions in Gaddafi's hometown of Sirte. We know another night of action, possibly another morning of action. Tell us, how far at this point west have the rebels proceeded?
Well, the latest word we're hearing from the rebels is that they've taken over that town of Sirte. This comes as a huge surprise to people here in Tripoli because Sirte is traditionally Gaddafi's hometown. It is where the members of his tribe dominate. It is where he has a bastion of support, and it's also where repeatedly he's tried to make the capital of this country. Now, if indeed those reports are true, and we have no independent confirmation, it certainly does mean that the march to Tripoli will have skyrocketed. So far, the rebels have advanced from their hometown of Benghazi to Ajdabia, 160 kilometers to the east. From there, they moved on to the town of Ras Lanouf, that is a port city. That is after taking over the oil town of Brega. From there to Bin Jawad and now to Sirte. Now, we did earlier hear reports that the entrances to Sirte had been mined, but the latest reports from the rebels is that they met little to no resistance, that Gaddafi's men fled, and that they offered them very little resistance. There are reports, though, coming through that the Gaddafi fighters have actually stockpiled some of their arms and ammunitions in civilian buildings. If indeed this is true, it will make any kind of airstrikes extremely risky in terms of there being civilian casualties. Now, we are hearing from the government spokesperson, Mr. Ibrahim Musa, that overnight there were airstrikes for the first time in Sirte, and as you say, there were loud explosions coming from there. He says that 3 young men were killed when a fishing area not far from the city came under fire. He also says that there were an additional 29 people who were injured in a peace convoy that we saw set off here from Tripoli with the ultimate goal of reaching Benghazi. And he says that they were hit by rebels in the town of Bin Jawad. The government still claiming that around 100 civilians have been killed in these airstrikes. Meanwhile, in the western part of the country, in the town of Misrata, their fighting continues. This is one of 2 towns that the rebels have been trying to take over. This town is about halfway. It's actually on the road between Sirte and Tripoli, so it will be interesting to watch developments there as the advancement comes from Sirte, if indeed the reports we are hearing are true. I think it's worth mentioning that Sirte is about 600 kilometers to the south of the capital city, Tripoli. It's also halfway between the rebel-held east and the Gaddafi-controlled west. Now, overnight here in the capital city of Tripoli, there were 9 loud explosions. There was also a lot of anti-aircraft gunfire going off.
Now, Paula, the coalition is transferring full command of the operation to NATO now. What's likely to change, do you think, with the alliance in charge?
Well, I think because we've seen this rebel advancement happening with almost lightning speed since Friday, most rebels are actually not too concerned in terms of a change of leadership. They just want to get the job done and essentially reach Tripoli, which increasingly seems more and more possibility. But certainly among the rebel leadership, there are concerns that as you now have a 28 NATO member alliance calling the shots, it will be a lot more difficult to implement robust action on the ground as opposed to when you had the United States just in charge. What we have heard from NATO is that they will be taking over full control of military operations from Tuesday. There is a summit to be held in London. Between now and then, they are in some kind of transitional phase. There are still, though, a number of sticking points. One of these is in terms of the rules of engagement, and here we've heard a lot of concerns from the various countries who are involved. We are also hearing that there's no timeline for the action. So what this means is that you could see NATO in command of an operation that could essentially carry on for weeks, if not months. Turkey has come to the party. Turkey saying that it will act as a mediator. It wants to enforce some kind of peace talks, possibly between the rebels and Gaddafi himself. They say that they want a ceasefire to be implemented as soon as possible. One of the other concerns, particularly here on the ground, is that for some time now, NATO has been enforcing a naval blockade on the country. We've heard from the government that whereas once 5 to 7 ships used to reach Libyan shores each day, now there are simply none. And they say that some of these ships actually had reinforcements in terms of fuel, in terms of water, in terms of food. So that is increasingly becoming a growing concern in the city of Tripoli, particularly here as supplies run low.
So not just a UN-imposed no-fly zone, but also a naval blockade in effect as well. RT's Paula Slier, live from the Libyan capital. Thank you. Well, with the US being the military and economic backbone of NATO,